But sometimes what you want is multiple items from that page.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll want all of the post titles or all the links to the comment sections from each post on the page. And if we look in the HTML here, you can see there's a lot of HTML going on. So we'll need to pay close attention to how this is structured before we get working on that. You'll see there's this really big div here. And in between them is this div called clear left. And there's just a bunch of these in sequence. So looking at one of these divs, we'll see what data we have available on it. You can look at its classes, which are a great way to get a hold of something when you're automating.
Absolutely.
It has the class thing, link flare, odd, link, self, and this ID. We learned earlier that these IDs are dynamically generated, so not super helpful to us. So let's take a look at what elements are things and see if we can grab one of these posts. We'll start document query selector all dot thing, and we get a lot of items. 0, 1, 2, 8, 7, 6. Yeah, number 8 here was the one we were looking at. But if we look up at the top of the page, the first post is item number 4. So we haven't quite filtered for posts just yet. So let's take another look at these. They all have thing on them. And they all have unique IDs. Only this one has link flare. That's because that one has one of these flares here, need help, and the other one doesn't. It goes back and forth between even and odd.
Yeah.
So then our other two items are link and self. So let's try the first one there. Dot thing. Let's just try dot link and see where that gets us. At the top here, that looks good. Down here at the bottom, it looks like looking for dot link gets us to where we want to be.
Yeah.
But that's not always true. Sometimes you'll need to only get items that have thing and link, for example. And CSS lets you do that by just putting the dot name together. So here, this looks for elements that are both a thing and a link. But if you put a space in the middle, it looks for things that are link that has a parent that's a thing.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. Yeah. What is the, or is the greater than sign? I thought the greater than sign was showing the nesting. What does that do?
The greater than sign requires that it's a direct child, whereas just a space lets it be anywhere in the child tree.
Awesome, thank you.
They're both useful in different situations.
Yeah, right.
Most of the time I use a space, but anyway.
Yeah,
these are useful in many different situations, and especially if you're writing CSS, you'll find yourself needing to use a lot more of these. But for automation, the angle brackets and the space with either dot class, pound ID, or just the element name will get you there.
Yeah, when I did a couple videos on query selector and selector all, in between that and using Selenium, I did a lot of research on this whole CSS way to connect to the things. I just, I need to write them down on a sticky because I can't remember them. And it is amazing how complex you can make them. Like I totally got the value.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool.
Let's see here.
So you have those. Do you want to go ahead and get the like the URL or the title or something?
Yeah. One of the big deals with Chrome.ahk is that it's hard to go from a list of elements to a list of data in your AutoHotkey code. So as I was saying earlier, you want to do all that processing in the JavaScript side of it.
Right.
And the appropriate method to use here is .map. But like we did with the array prototype filter that we did up here, or use brackets for array, map isn't available from query selector all. So we'll want to...
I just realized something, GeekDude. Sorry. The two brackets on the far left, that's the same thing that you're doing in the other stuff, and it's just blank, which means anything. Is that right?
Yeah, anything that's a valid array can be used there.
Okay.
And here I'm just using an empty array because it's really quick to type. Array.prototype is literally the default array in JavaScript. Or, you could just have an array with some data in it. What's not defined here?
It's okay. I didn't mean to derail you. I was just understanding the brackets over there, and that in at least in Selenium, where you're putting the items you're looking for the CSS, I thought were between brackets, if I remember correctly. And it just popped in my head of like...
Yeah, I don't know much about Selenium, but that's not the case here.
Okay.
So this map function does a really kind of marvelous thing. It takes whatever your list is. In this case, we have a list of those div tags. And it gets something out of each of those and returns a new array with just that sub value. I see your eyebrows went up there, Joe.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, keep going.
So just like when we filtered to check if the element's inner text was something, here we can say we just want the inner text.
Yeah. Wow.
And we go from a list of page elements to a list of the text from those page elements.
Wow, that's amazing.
But that's still not quite what we want. So we've got this list of page elements, but now on each individual page element, we'll need to drill down a little bit further.
Right.
So just looking at this top post here, read before posting, we can get our author, we can get the URL, we can get some other information about it just from that top element, but the post title is not part of that top element. The post title is here under P class title, an A class title. So what we really want is in this element, which is nested 3 or 4 layers deep inside what we got.
Mm-hmm.
And so like we did chaining with queries selectors earlier, we can do a query selector on just that element to get things from there. So we wanted to get that A element, and it looks like just searching for A has done the trick. Get that A element that we're looking for. But if you wanted to be extra safe, you could say you want an A element and it should have the class title. And you do that by just sticking them together, the selectors together, without a space.
Okay.
This looks for something that's both an A element and has a title class.
Yeah, you showed us that earlier. But, yeah.
And then we can grab the text from there. Let me just format this a little bit differently for clarity. We want to map over all of our posts.
Yep.
And then on every post, do this code to get our value for that post.
Right.
In this case, take our post and query for that title element's text. And now we have an array of titles. And that's exactly what we need to get our value into AutoHotkey. I'm going to pressing caps lock instead of shift here. I'm going to comment out the single value example and add some new JavaScript. I think I deleted that last parenthesis. Get that last bit of JavaScript in there and see how that looks from AutoHotkey. So again, we have this blank window. And again, that's because AutoHotkey doesn't show objects in message boxes. So if we go back here, we'll see our result is type is object, subtype is array. And let me do a little tweak here to make it easier for you guys to see. If you pass the second parameter to this dump function as the number 4, it'll add formatting where each key is started on a new line with 4 spaces before it. And then let's see if I can make this bigger. So the data we get is just that it is an array, not that any of the values are here. And that's just a quirk of the Chrome DevTools protocol. More often than not, it'll tell you a much shorter representation of what you're looking for. And the way you would want to get around that actually takes advantage of this JSON library that Coco wrote. Just like if you were building your own web page and you wanted to pass some data to a server, you would want to serialize it, is the term. When you're passing large amounts of data from JavaScript to AutoHotkey, you'll want to serialize it. So to add one more layer of complexity to this already kind of insane looking bit of JavaScript, you would wrap all of that in JSON.stringify, and now it comes through as a piece of text that contains all your items. And then AutoHotkey can decode that text using that function that I did, that I demonstrated. Oh, I haven't demonstrated it yet. We'll get there, promise.
I was just saying, 'cause that's not JSON code, straight up at least. It looked like it was an array of, it looked more like an AutoHotkey object to me.
AutoHotkey objects and JSON are almost exactly the same format-wise.
Yeah.
So here, for clarity, I've put my JavaScript into a continuation section. If you've written a lot of AutoHotkey, you'll recognize these as a way to do text assignment to a multiple line value. But you may also recognize that it sometimes struggles if your text has these closed parentheses in it. So let's take a look first to make sure that it's reading the JavaScript correctly. And no, AutoHotkey gets upset by these bare closed parentheses. And so what we're going to do is just take these and put them onto the end of this line. JavaScript doesn't mind if you do this. So it's an easy way to make sure that...
Yeah, I've run into the same thing when I'm using that or a join command.
Right. So now we've got our data here, our JavaScript code.
Right.
Or if you don't want to mess with the formatting like that, you could make a variable that has the closed parenthesis.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just reference that.
Right.
And you'll get your JavaScript looking all nice and pretty.
Right.
And now we can try again to run that JavaScript through AutoHotkey. And now we actually get our data into AutoHotkey. It comes in as a string, and the value is, it looks similar to what we have here. So let's see what we can do with that.
See, on the JSON, or sorry, JavaScript, over your head, is starting off with a bracket. Well, obviously the double quote first, but that's what was throwing me was, for me, JSON was always a curly brace, and so I thought that was something just slightly different.
Yeah, let's take a look at JSON just a little here. There's this wonderful website, json.org, that shows you exactly what JSON can and cannot be using flowcharts. So JSON is built on two structures: a collection of name-value pairs called an object, and an ordered list of values called an array. An object can start with a curly brace and then have all this in it, whereas an array can have this information. Square bracket followed by either white space and a closed bracket, or a value and a closed bracket, or a value and another value and another value, and then a closed bracket. And these are all the different types of values. You can have strings, numbers, more objects and arrays, true, false, and null. And if you work a lot with JavaScript, you'll see null come up more often, whereas if you're web scraping, you might not see null as much.
I just don't think I've ever seen JSON an array, but
they exist.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, they do exist. They don't get as much love as their cousins the objects.
Yeah.
But that's just because most of the time when you're dealing with JSON, it's because you've pulled some data from somewhere and they want to tag it with a name. Whereas here, we don't need to name this. We know.
Yeah.
We know what it is, so we can just send the list without encapsulating it in an object.
Okay.
Okay, so we've gotten our list of data into AutoHotkey, but it's just as one big piece of text. It's not as an AutoHotkey array. We can't really loop over this or extract an individual piece. And that's where this other JSON function comes in, JSON _ load. And you can give that JSON data that was text and make it into an AutoHotkey object.
Mm-hmm.
See, now we're getting a blank pop-up because it can't process that kind of data. The message box can't. But what can process it is one of these for loops.
Mm-hmm.
So we can throw our message box in here. And then let's pull up the Chrome page just to check for quality. Read this before posting. Looking for practice. Open and close tab easy on AHK Studio. That'd be something you're interested in, Joe.
Yeah.
Automatic keystroke manipulations. Yeah, so it looks like we're getting the right values in the right order. If we want, we can save this to a variable so we can process it later. Or save it to a variable because we want to access it multiple times. Let's say we're really only interested in seeing the first or second post from the subreddit. So now we can go in and just access an individual item. Grab the 5th item here. We're back in AutoHotkey land, so 5 is 5th. If we look over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is it possible to create a variable hotkey? Possible to create a variable hotkey.
Cool.
So finally, we've got our list of data into AutoHotkey to where we can use it however we want.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a long path. However, I see how, generally speaking, you got to shift your mentality to working in JavaScript. But there's some really powerful stuff in there. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. You just got to learn something new.
Oh, for sure. One thing that many sites offer on the JavaScript side that really makes this stuff much easier is most websites include a library called jQuery.
Yeah.
And so on those sites, especially if you're already familiar with jQuery, you can harness it to do most of the legwork.
Oh, interesting.
And just as long as your JavaScript code outputs a string or a number at the end, it's really easy to get that into AutoHotkey. Getting the JavaScript to do that, though, that's where the devil lies.
Mm. But help me understand. You're saying the website has to be built in a certain way where it has the jQuery kind of back.
Right. So it's not generally applicable.
Okay.
But
if it's there, then
yeah, like this Reddit site has jQuery on it. Something like Google.com, where it's been really slimmed down.
Yeah.
Since it gets accessed literally hundreds of millions of times a day. You'll see jQuery is not defined on here. I wonder if Bing has jQuery. Nope, not quite. But I'd bet something like Wired.com would have it. Guess not. Anyway, it's available in a lot of places, but as my short stint of examples shows, it's not universal by any means.
But it's really good to know there's a whole nother way that might simplify how you're trying to connect to that page. You just got to check to see if it's there. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you're Googling for examples in JavaScript on how to do things, a lot of times on Stack Overflow, someone will respond with a jQuery example.
Yeah.
Like right here. This guy asks how to get pure text without HTML using JavaScript. The first guy comments this big example. The second guy comments a much smaller example with native JavaScript.
Yeah.
And the third guy just says, just use jQuery. It's simple.
And help me understand that. So, I know you've said jQuery needs to be available on that server, the page you connect to. But is there any possible way to have jQuery with AutoHotkey that you disregard, that you could take the JSON object from the web page, still shove it in to leverage jQuery, or no?
jQuery is mostly for manipulating the HTML of a page, and getting that.
Okay.
Getting those HTML elements into AutoHotkey is really the more difficult thing to do.
I get it. Yeah.
It would be possible to just grab the HTML and then use some kind of HTML code on the AutoHotkey side. But when you already have JavaScript available,
that's the way to go.
By far the way to go.
Well, I was just saying if the site didn't have, let's say, what was the one you started off? Whatever the ones didn't have. Google didn't have jQuery.
Right.
But what if you could take that? But you're not. I thought you're still connecting to it. No, you're not. You weren't connecting to the jQuery with JSON. You were just going straight into the jQuery. Is that right?
Yeah, from the JavaScript.
Oh, so you were. Okay. And that's where I thought, I wonder if you could grab the JavaScript info and then still, you leverage jQuery in some way, even though it's not on that site. But
it would be possible to inject jQuery into a site, but I think that's a little outside the scope of what we're doing today.
Oh, that's fine. I was just curious. Cool. All right. Is this a good spot to stop on the recording?